Hello everyone, this is Roland. Today I want to continue with my discussion about courage. Courage is in the face of adversity, okay? And you will have ample opportunities to look for courage and see if you have it. Courage comes from character. And how do you build character? Well, most of us are compensated. See, we're compensated, meaning that we rely upon our great vast storehouse of knowledge, or on our cleverness, or on our ability to fool people and trick them or seduce people. See? Well, you're very shaky ground if that's where your confidence comes from. Or some people develop confidence from big muscles. See, or from being clever with the judo or karate or something like that. Well, those things have their place, okay? They have their place, but there's a courage that you need that's deeper than that. It's a courage that comes from being aligned with what is right and what is good and what is true and what is fair. Being aligned with it means living it. See? So in other words, if you won't have a leg to stand on. If you're smoking a marijuana cigarette, how can you talk about drugs? See, if you tell sleazy stories, then how can you encourage people to behave properly? If you're drinking, how can you encourage people or reprimand someone for drinking or tell them not to drink? See? So if you rely on pills, see, you have to be independent, where you don't have to rely upon. It's nice to have strength, physical strength. That's good. It's nice to have it. And it's nice to be clever with words and to have knowledge. Those are nice. Okay? But they only go so far. Okay? But if your life is a shaky one built upon fooling people and seducing them and being a people pleaser, or your life or your courage is in the bottle or in pills, see, then you don't have courage. You have what appears to be courage, but you don't have it. You're more like a big bowl of Jell-O, see. But on the outside, you put on a good show. Now, the other thing about courage is that, so I said you have to live rightly. Okay, so you can't have vices, or you're still making some mistakes. Okay, then you have to be outgrowing them. You have to be overcoming them. You have to be getting better. See, you have to be getting better. And then you have to be better. Okay, you can't be a little bit sleazy. See, life is very decisive. Christ once said, no man can serve two masters. You can't serve two masters. You can't ride two horses at the same time. So you're either on the side of right or you're not. See, life is very decisive. A lot of people like to be somewhere in the middle and think they can play footsies with the devil, where they say all the right things, but then they go out and do wrong things. So you have to be right through and through and through. Okay? So what does right mean? Well, right means that you're close to your intuition, to what you know is right in your heart, which is also another word for conscience. You're very close to your conscience. And you love what is right. See, that's another requirement. You have to love what's right. See, you have to love what's right. And you have to be committed to what is right. Otherwise, when opposition comes along, you will have nothing. Your roots are shallow. Remember, Christ talked about people building their house upon sand. Well, you have built your house upon sand, and when the adversity comes, your foundation will be washed away. See, whatever those foundations might be, they're very shallow. So your roots have to go very deep into what's right, and then you have to be committed to it. come what may, you take your stand. Okay? That's what's required. I know this is a hard teaching, but that is what's required. Now, so you see, so first of all, do you love what's right? Well, a lot of people do. They love it somewhat. Or like somebody once said, you know, when other people are doing wrong things, then we cry mercy, we cry justice, justice. We want justice. But when we're doing something wrong, then we cry mercy, mercy. See? So a lot of us are like, what's the old expression? There was a cute little saying. It says Christians are like tea bags. Okay, you have to put them in hot water to find out what flavor they are. Okay, something like that. So you have to be committed to what's right. Okay, you remember Mother Teresa, little tiny lady, a tiny lady, probably weighed all of 80 pounds, sopping wet. Remember when she met Bill Clinton? She was invited to a prayer breakfast or something. Bill Clinton was there. And she reprimanded him for solacing abortions. She reprimanded him right there. Talk about courage, see? She had courage. But why did she have courage? Because she was committed to what's right. She was committed to what's right, see? So now, let's look at, now how about you men? You fathers, you husbands, okay? Are you committed to what's right? Well, see, you have to be. But now I have to say something else, and that is that a lot of men like I said, remember I said that most people are just compensation. They don't have roots that go deep. See, take Moses, for example. Moses loved what was right. He had a sense of justice. Remember when he was a young man and he saw one of the Egyptian soldiers that was beating up or something, one of his fellow Israelitish people? Did you remember that? And he became angry. And then he killed that soldier. See? He did. See, because he had a keen sense of justice. He didn't like to see the injustice of that. Okay, so he had that. So you need to have that. So if you're a young person, okay, well, it's not time yet for you to be a Moses or a Winston Churchill. Although it might be. There have been young men in history who have, and young ladies, who have done very great things. Remember the story of Grace Darling? You probably haven't heard. Grace Darling, a young lady, I think she was a teenager, and it was in England, and there was a terrible storm. They lived on the coast. It was a terrible storm, and then there was a shipwreck, and then there were the passengers on the ship were I think it was a passenger ship. The passengers were hanging onto the rock in a raging storm, and no one wanted to go because the storm was too terrible. And Grace Darling went to her father, and she said, "We must go and we must get one of our little boats and go try to rescue those people." And he said, "No, we can't, because we'll be smashed on the rocks ourselves." She said, "We have to. We have to try to save them." She pleaded and pleaded and pleaded, and she wouldn't stop. Finally, her father said, "Okay." We got in the boat. He went out, and he actually rescued a lot of those people. He rescued them. She was a great hero, this Grace Darling. If it hadn't been for her, those people would have perished. You see, she was very courageous. Although she was only a teenager. There's a lot of stories of young people who have demonstrated courage. A lot of stories. So you don't have to wait until you're old. But I'm saying that people like Moses and Winston Churchill, people like that, their calling came later in life. But what I was going to say about Moses, that he wasn't compensated at all. See, he had the finest education, Remember, he was raised in the Pharaoh's household. He could have been a prince. He threw it all away. He threw it all away, and he became a shepherd out in the desert. So he was out in the desert as a shepherd for 40 years. See? And he claimed that he wasn't very good at speaking. He became tongue-tied, and maybe he stammered. I don't know. He just, see? So to all the world, he was nothing. He was nothing. He'd given everything up, and he was just this little shepherd, and he couldn't express himself very well, and yet God chose him. But when the time came, he received the power from God. So there was no compensation. The power was completely from God. See? Now there's magic there. But what you need to do as a young person, and as a person who wants to start living properly, see, do you want to keep living life as a sleazy person? See, a sleazy people pleaser, sleazy nothing, doesn't stand for anything. See, who compensated, just becoming angry. See, most people become angry. That's their idea of courage, just become angry. No. It's just it's a compensation, and it's wrong too. So if you want to start developing some character, you can be respected. See, then you need to refine your roots. Okay, you have to refine your roots. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to find the inner light from God, which you now know as conscience. You now know that as conscience. See, now you may have a sense of justice, which is good, and you don't like seeing wrong prevail. That's good. Okay, so you may be the kind of person God can use if you have a keen sense of justice. But undoubtedly, if you're like most people, your problem is that you become angry and resentful. And when you become angry and resentful, you see injustice and you become angry and resentful. And you know what that does? It separates you from your ground. See? Separates you from your ground of good. And then you have nothing. See? And the enemy knows that. That's why the enemy is always there testing. See? Telling a little off-color joke to see if you laugh, or whether you sheepishly go, ha, 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 you know. Or do you stand there and look at the person and let them have egg on their face? Stand there and don't laugh. See? It's just a little example. So remember I said earlier, life is decisive. See? Christ said, you can't serve two masters. You're going to have to serve one or the other. Now most of us go through life serving the devil. That's right. You know why? Because we're not committed to what's right. So since you're not committed to what's right, see, then you are half-baked at best, possibly confused about what is right, angry. So you serve his purposes. See, if you could have been a noble knight in shining armor, so you could have been a knight in shining armor. But instead of marrying your wife, you just live with her. See? Well, then you don't have honor. You don't have honor. See? Or you could have been the noble knight and stand for something, but instead you're selfish. You smoke marijuana and watch ball games and see, selfish. So you're not respected. So you're a bad example then. See, how many times do you hear people say how much they despise hypocrites? A lot of people say, well, the reason I don't want to be a Christian. Wasn't it Gandhi? He said, they asked Gandhi about Christianity, and he said something like, well, it sounds good. I like, what it sounds like. But he said, the problem is I've never seen it. I've never met a real Christian. See? Because, see, if you just talk about things, but you don't live it. See, if you just Talk about it, just don't live it. Then you, in the eyes of others, see they have no respect for you. Your kids have no respect for you. Your wife has no respect for you. See, or you didn't marry her, so your partner has no respect for you. Oh, sure, they pretend to. See, but they really don't. Because they see that you don't have honor and you don't live according to principle. See? So you have to stand, so you have to align yourself with the good spirit. Align yourself with the good Lord, if you will. Well, how do you do that? Well, you can't do it. It's not by going to church or studying religious books or anything like that. You have to become still. Learn how to sit still for your conscience. Let's put it that way. I'm going to assume that you're a halfway decent person, a little bit sleazy, but you have a little bit of a sense of justice, and so, there's hope for you. Some people, there's no hope for them. See, they love evil, they love what's rotten, and they want to wallow in it. And they love their sensuality and their rottenness, and their selfishness and their greediness, and that's all that they live for, nothing else. So but some people, they have a love of justice, a sense of justice, and they do like what's right. But see, the problem is then you begin to feel it before conscience. Then you feel guilty. See, what a lot of men too. Here's the other problem that men have, and I'm talking about men. Obviously, this applies to women too, but I'm talking about men because we all know that a man is supposed to be honorable and upright, and stand for something. See, and be noble. See. We all know that. You take a typical family. See, what happens if mom does some things that are not so good? Then the kids say what? Oh, that's just mom. That's mom. See, but if dad does something that's not right, oh my God, the whole family suffers. See, because the dad's not supposed to do things that aren't right. Okay, so. Oh, now I lost my train of thought. I had such a good idea. You have to live by your intuition, which is conscience. Oh, I wanted to say that if you're a halfway decent person or a little bit sleazy, but you have a sense of justice, so there's some hope for you, then you do have a conscience. Okay? But the problem is, like I was saying, you men, you dads, you husbands, is that you sense that you're not totally committed, you're still selfish. See? And you want other people to support your ego. You use your wife to support your ego. Okay? Instead of standing on your own 2 feet, you rely upon her to support your ego some way. Well, she will do it. Okay? But the problem is then your roots go out to the world, and you become dependent on her and not dependent on God. You see what I mean? You should be you should be independent. In other words, you stand on your own 2 feet. And you know what's right, and you live what's right, and you don't need support from anyone. You don't need support from anyone, including your wife. Okay? In other words, you don't need love, you give love. You give love. Then they can lean on you, instead of you leaning on them. See? Okay? So if you have a conscience, then what happens is then sometimes that works against you, because since you're not totally committed to what's right, then you sense that you are not so right, and so you feel a little bit inferior, a little bit unworthy to speak up. You feel unworthy to speak up, so you don't say anything when something should be said. So everybody walks all over, you become a doormat. Okay, and you don't speak up because A, you don't want to be angry, and B, you feel unworthy. So how do you become worthy? Well, you become worthy to speak up by aligning yourself with what's right and then expressing that right. See? You don't have to be the right. See, that's the other problem. You don't have to be the right. Okay? All you need to be is a conduit for what's right. So you learn how to sit still for conscience. And what will happen is then your conscience will will, if you're sincere and you sit still for it, my meditation helps, then conscience will overwhelm you. It'll rub your nose in your issues. And then, if you don't resent the inner light, and you don't resent your conscience, and you admit that you're wrong, see, instead of being too prideful, if you admit you're wrong, well, then conscience will then you become reconciled to conscience, reconciled to what's right, see, reconciled to the inner light from God, and then reconciled to the bright side, to the good side, okay? Then now you can speak spontaneously about what you see, what's right. When things need to be pointed out, you can speak about it spontaneously without pre-planning. You have to pre-plan, because in the moment what to say will come to you, and you'll say what needs to be said. Sometimes nothing needs to be said, but if something needs to be said, then you'll say it, and it'll just come out. You won't have pre-planned it, so your ego is not involved. In other words, you get your ego out of the way. You get your ego out of the way, and you just say what is true. See, and it has a very special effect, because there's no ego in it. There's no pride in it. You're just saying what's true. See, and so it has a very nice effect upon people. See, so you become an external conscience. That's what people need. Your kids, sometimes all they need is to just see you there, standing for what's right. And if opposition comes and they see you suffering, then they see you suffering with dignity, and not, crying out to your wife or to someone else, or to the bottle, or to the bartender, or to your peers at work. You're alone. They see your aloneness. They see your honor. They see your dignity, and they're profoundly touched. Okay? So we'll continue with this topic about courage in my next lecture.